Hi, I'll pick up where I left off in the last video from the chapter on the Mordent in Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's Versuch über die wahre Art des Klavier zu spielen. A lot of people see spoon feeding as the right, and they'll judge something they see on the level of spoon feeding that's done. And I noticed that it's particularly strong with the older people get. So if somebody's, mature in years, they'll be the ones who'll, throw a tantrum if there's no spoon feeding being done. And they'll see it as their sophistication, that they can recognize when there's spoon feeding done or not. And they'll see it, they'll hold it against younger people that they don't notice that there's no spoon feeding being done, and they'll see it as the naivety of the young person if they don't protest to the lack of spoon feeding. So the biggest tantrum throwers who don't get spoon fed are rather people, mature people. Spoon feeding is not necessarily a good thing. Because it means, it doesn't matter. There's that saying, spare the rod and spoil the child. That'll be another clue to the Stockholm Syndrome. That is the motto of the music schools and universities. Spare the rod and spoil the child, because they themselves, it was done to them too, and they are suffering the results of that. They live in fear. They haven't got a clue. Somebody like me comes along and they are shaking in their boots. Somebody draws up questions that they know they can't answer, and all they want to do is run away or get rid of me, and hope that their students don't see me or get influenced, because the students will start expecting answers or expecting more, and they know they can't provide it because they were spoiled. And that is because spoon feeding is all that exists. That's why your experts aren't able to come up with this information. And that is why, they'll belittle me or this channel and the things that are said, because when a person in Lilliput feels threatened, their defense mechanism is try to belittle that which they feel threatened by, because what they feel threatened by makes them feel small. And the thing a person in Lilliput hates the most is being made feel small. So, and if they can belittle the thing that makes them feel small, well, then it gets smaller in their mind, so they can feel bigger again. That's a character of, or a trait of, Lilliput. Der Mordent wird bei auszuhaltenden Noten zur Ausfüllung gebraucht. Also trifft man ihn, wie wir bei Figur 74 sehen, über bindenden A, punktierten B und rückenden Noten an. Diese letzten mögen auf einem Tone oft hintereinander C oder bei Abwechslung der Intervallen rücken D. Bei dieser letzteren Art von Noten lässt sich der Mordent am besten über der einmaligen Wiederholung des vorigen Tones anbringen. E. In diesen Rückungen füllt der Mordent nicht allein, sondern macht zugleich die Noten glänzend. Then in 74E, we see the pattern established by the examples of C and D interrupted. So the pattern has been interrupted. Although the syncopations in E begin on a changing interval, like they did in the two examples of D, the first mordent is, however, over the first note, as it is in 74C, as opposed to it being over the G, the first syncopating note. Why is that? So, once again, when the one tone is repeated like it is in 74C, Bach gives the first note, the one that precedes the first syncopated note, a mordent. And when the syncopations are on notes that change intervals, the mordent is not on the first preceding note, but rather over the first syncopated note. And figure 74E breaks that pattern. Bach gives it special mention and says the mordent is best placed over the single repeat of the previous tone. In other words, he's saying, don't put it over the first G, which, by the way, would cancel out the mordent over the C, for reasons we'll get to in paragraph 9, and would have the example looking like those examples of 74D. Put it over the second G. He says, don't put it over the first G, put it over the second G. And if you were to put it over the first G, that example, the only mordent in that bar then would be over that first G. There'd be no mordent anymore on that C, the preceding C. And there'd be no mordent on the second G. We find a reason for the break in the pattern when it's connected to paragraph 4, where he says the mordent doesn't occur so often with downward leaping notes. Bei Herunterspringenden kommt sie nicht so oft vor. The G is downward leaping. With that, he's also helping to explain why there's a mordent over the C when there wasn't one over the corresponding notes in the examples of 74D. Since Bach in paragraph 4 as well showed us when mordents over downward leaping notes can occur, namely when they follow an appoggiatura, we can also gather from that the C in 74E is not an appoggiatura. The forte piano execution of an appoggiatura, together with its Abzug, so the Abzug is the pull off the note, the principal note to which the appoggiatura has been attached. So, and the forte and piano execution of those two notes will help counteract the negative influence a mordent can exert, or the imbalance it can create when placed over a downward leaping note. Here is the mordent on that downward leaping G, so you can hear its effects. There we can see Bach's standard of teaching, how much he puts on the plate, which the roll of honour sat in its high chair, completely misses. And again, the mordent is not just filling out the note in the case of syncopations, but also making it lustrous or brilliant. And as I said, when you know why you are adding the mordents, to what effect, you can better determine when the goal has been achieved. You know what you're aiming for. And you can better answer the question, should I be adding them? You know, you can have people adding ornaments to pieces that are brilliant enough as they are. So it's like adding too much, spoiling a meal by adding too much spice to it. Killing, drowning the natural flavors of the meal. Why is one toiling away with cage activity? To what effect? What is the metronome working to achieve with its utter absence of pulse? There might be a big "I don't know" coming from a voice in your head when you try to think about it. What's the metronome working to achieve? The only things you'll come up with, and as you progress and develop and become more refined and more competent and more sophisticated, you'll think the only answers that you come up with, well, the metronome is meant to get me to not, to stop me from speeding up or slowing down. It's meant to push me to be able to play faster, to push me to get at full speed, because I'll be forced to keep up with the metronome. And later on, you're going to think of those and realize how backward, it's they're like the goals of, I don't know, they're the goals of people who will never have a hope of achieving anything in piano ever in their life. It's the goals of people in the cage. The only way out of the cage is to denounce the cage and embrace and turn to the correct answer, turn to the true way to play the piano. Bei den Exempel mit A und B kann man anmerken, dass man, wenn ja die Zeitmaß so langsam wäre, dass auch ein langer Mordent zum Ausfüllen nicht hinreichen wollte, diese langen Noten dadurch verkürzt, indem man sie noch einmal anschlägt und ungefähr so vorträgt, wie wir in der Abbildung unter eben den Buchstaben sehen. Diese Freiheit muss man nicht anders als aus Not und Vorsicht brauchen. Man muss den Absichten des Verfassers eines Stückes dadurch nicht tort tun. Man wird diesem Fehler dadurch leicht entgehen können, wenn man durch den gehörigen Druck und durch die Unterhaltung einer Note gewahr wird, dass unser Instrument den Ton länger aushält, als viele glauben mögen. Man muss also bei Gelegenheit des langen Mordenten weder die Schönheit des Nachklangs verhindern und denselben sowie die übrigen, weder über jeder etwas langen Note anbringen, noch zu lange aushalten. Bei allen Ausfüllungen durch Mordenten muss allezeit noch ein kleiner Zeitraum übrig bleiben. Und der am besten angebrachte Mordent wird ekelhaft, wenn sich wie der Triller in einer geschwinden Verbindung an die folgende Note anschließt. Here's figure 74A, the original example. And this is the corresponding A, where Bach shortened the E quarter note by turning it into two 8 notes and tying the second of the two to the first E of the 16 notes of the second beat. So that's what you see on the screen. And this is when the tempo is indeed so slow that even a long mordent wouldn't suffice in filling out the note. So, Bach is mentioning a long mordent in relation to those notes in 74A and B, which are notes that are to be held out, which means the mordents there could also, according to Bach, be long. You know, I told you I had a suspicion. Aside from that specific scenario where one might find oneself having to take such liberty out of necessity, I'd definitely say that this idea is worth keeping in mind when thinking of possible ways to vary the repeat of a section in a slow movement. Syncopation is an element Mozart often used when varying the repeat of a section, as I'm sure many of you already know or have already encountered. I could imagine this suggestion of Bach's being a subtle and easy use of that technique that one could take advantage of. And perhaps one could add to that the concept of shortening long notes in general, not just tied notes, when faced with the task of varying a repeat. You know, you could have it in the toolbox. Subtle differences without going too far. Under the right circumstances, that is. The left-hand accompaniment would have to fit, for example. This would be an element that could influence the character of the music. If it's a sustained chord or simple bass note, then the change might be okay. It might not undermine the composer's intention. If it is a broken chord style of accompaniment or repeated chords, then one would have to be careful, I'd imagine. What follows the tied note would also play a role. Basically, every situation is going to present its own specific set of circumstances which have to be factored in when making a judgment call. Most of these circumstances do not exist in the cage. It's all just notes in the cage. You will never encounter them with cage activity. All you have is repetition, breaking it up into rhythms, waiting for your teacher, your professor to tell you to get a bit louder here or a bit softer there. And other than that, those artificial things added on top of it, it's flat. Everything is flat. Honoring or staying true to the intentions. What I'm saying, is a challenge, or it's difficult, and it's not. I don't exactly enjoy it, and I don't look forward to these videos. I would like it if the roll of honor weren't so bad. I'd be happier. I would have been happier. My time wouldn't have been wasted by them when I was in their grasp. It's like that, with Lord of the Rings. There's the worm tongue and the king of Rohan. What was his name? King Theoden or something, and he was under the influence of worm tongue, and he wasn't himself. And he was always fed this pandering, spare the rod, spoil the child. Oh, you're doing great. You're wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's beautiful what you're doing. It's so good. And then the true friend, the good Gandalf, comes, and he comes with news that's not so pleasant to hear, with the hard truth, the unpleasant truths. And unfortunately, with the right answer, when your objective is to deceive, to charm, to win the favor of people, that will influence what you say. So you'll tell them what they're doing is great, when what they're doing is detrimental. Whereas if you're dealing with the truth or the correct answer, you don't have a choice what you can say. And you're stuck saying it. When you have to say something that nobody likes, you're stuck saying something that nobody likes, because if it's the right answer, that's what has to be said. And it's like when I was going through the system in college, I read every single book on technique I could get my hands on. Any bit of literature. I read biographies or autobiographies for the little bit of mention that might have been made to practicing, or any kind of extra information I could get on technique. And I went through it all, and there's the crap from the Dorothy Taubman or Dorothy Deafman, and that's the same as, there's another one, an English one I think, probably from the name Abby Whiteside, and it's the same rubbish. And I fell for that completely, and I was trying it, and it was a load of crap. It was a waste of time, and it pandered. The thing is, it pandered. That's why I fell for it. It was pandering to me. Its mission was to seduce, to glorify my mediocrity, my deficiencies, and it led nowhere. It got me nowhere. And then I read something in my search, in reading every single book on technique I could lay my hands on, and in every dictionary, and I read in a big encyclopedia of famous pianists. I read one pianist who said, "You'll never be able to play anything through slow practice. You can either play it immediately, or you won't be able to play it." And of course, that meant, for me at the time, that meant I was screwed. And I hated that. I hated that the most. But that had turned out to be the most true thing that was said. So when I was searching, when I didn't know anything, when I was at that stage where I knew nothing and searching for the answers, it was the truth I disliked the most, and it was the poison, the lies, the deceptiveness that I liked the most. And you will find with AC fingering and AC finger position and, you know, escaping the cage, and that'll get you out of the cage as far as technical. And all those episode videos, that covers everything that gives you the technical facility to be able to start experiencing, getting a taste of what's in the world of music. You will find that the need for slow practice vanish. You'll find the need for metronome work, it'll all start to vanish. And what eventually, when you get to my stage, you'll find that you sit down and play a piece new for the first time. It's gonna sound, obviously it's not gonna be flawless like, you know, when it's brought up, but it's basically going to be the exact same as the finished product when you sight read. That's what happens. And I don't care, nobody's going to believe me, and I don't think I can demonstrate that, because I think if I was to sight read something, you'd think I'm lying, like I've prepared it and I've been practicing it for weeks beforehand. So I don't think there's any point in even trying to, and I don't care. That's something that you'll discover. It's like a bone, you know, when the truth, it unlocks. It, you know, it doesn't even need to, you know, it'll exceed. There's lots of instances where things are hyped and then it's a big disappointment. This is the opposite. This will exceed all your expectations. Yeah. It's the truth. I liked the truth the least. And most and from somebody who's gone through the system, and I'm not, you know, I'm one of you. I'm like I'm asserting my rights here as an individual. I am not on the other side. I am, you know, the roll of honor, they see us as the enemy. You know, in terms of universities, I'm worth nothing. In the university I went to, I'm worth nothing compared to the people who are actually enrolled and attending the university. They're the ones who are worth more, and they're worth something only until the question of those who have not yet enrolled come into play. Like, let's say if somebody who is enrolled says, I'm not happy with the teaching I'm getting. If they think there's any people who have not yet enrolled, who are not yet studying, who have not yet paid, hearing that, the student asserting his rights or making his grievances, airing his grievances, is worth nothing, and they'll be silenced because for fear that the ones who are much more important, who have not yet enrolled, hear it and don't enroll. So there's the hierarchy. But overall, in that whole thing, we're all the enemy. We're all the enemy until they let the people in their rank, you know, include them in the club so they can switch sides in there. Then, but we're the enemy. I forget what I'm saying with that. Honouring or staying true to the intentions of the composer is rather high up on Bach's list. In his Versuch is evidence for this on more than this one occasion. I feel like it was important for him as it is for me. And for me it's of utmost importance. Yet, unlike the roll of honour, he is still able to critically assess the composer and their composition. His faithfulness is neither blind nor deaf. It is not a sycophancy. It's a matter of respect and humility when beholding the world of music. You know, you're humbled by that world of music. And any locations that any composer find are, you know, they're sacred locations, they're divine locations. They are to be praised and not to be, you know, defaced. Hence comes from Bach a safeguard of sorts, or at the very least a loaded sentence. Man wird diesem Fehler dadurch leicht entgehen können, wenn man durch den gehörigen Druck und durch die Unterhaltung einer Note gewahr wird, dass unser Instrument den Ton länger aushält, als viele glauben mögen. So that's a loaded sentence. What would you do with this if he were to say the same to you standing across from you in a lesson or a masterclass? Would you be taking it away with you? You know, when people talk about takeaways. A lesson from Bach. You know, there's that thing you'll hear, shaking the hand of a celebrity or a hero or something, and then the person saying, "I'm never going to wash this hand again." Would somebody who gets a lesson with Bach would they want to remember every single word that Bach said to them in that lesson? What I don't understand is why then people are so quick to dismiss or overlook the words he spent so much time thinking about. Should I be drawing the answer from the reception these videos get on YouTube? Nowhere else on that platform will you find Bach speaking more than he does here. This sentence touches on Ernest Hemingway's iceberg theory, that the bulk of the iceberg is submerged underwater and it's only the tip one sees, but the tip is moved by the hidden mountain of ice. Bach is saying, if people were to become aware that the instrument, and when he says unser Instrument, he could just as easily be talking about modern pianos, because our pianos are to us the exact same as what their keyboard instruments were to them, namely our daily instruments. So he's saying if people were to become aware that the instrument holds out the tone longer in the world of music than it does in the cage, than it does in Lilliput, with their rotation, their one tip to increase speed, their metronome work, their doorknob jiggling, they'd very easily avoid the mistake of doing a wrong to the intentions of the composer. So, if people were to become aware that the instrument holds out the tone longer in the world of music than it does in the cage, they'd very easily avoid the mistake of doing a wrong to the intentions of the composer. Hear the difference in the pieces I've uploaded and the damage done to the intentions of the composers by the Roll of Honour. It can be researched, it can be investigated. Everything I say can be. I say it as fact, I say it as the truth, which means I welcome anybody to actually investigate that and put it to the test or scrutinize it or see. I welcome fact checking. Because the closer one looks, the more one will see. and they'll start to see things they didn't even know existed. They'll start to see things that are beyond their comprehension. So with the main thing, obviously I'm paraphrasing. The good thing is with me though, you get to see, you hear exactly what Bach says and you see what he says. So if I paraphrase, Bach's words are there. But that is basically what he's saying. Because Bach is talking to the role of honor. He is talking about the role of honor. He is highlighting the difference between the true way to play and the role of honor way, the cage way, the Lilliput way, the way of the metronomes, the bad way to play the piano. So ungegründet und widersprechend diese Beschuldigungen sind, so gewisset Zeichen sind sie doch der schlechten Art, das Klavier zu spielen. Eventually I will tie up everything. Bach's opinion of the role of honor is going to be presented in its fullness. And that difference can be found and heard in the pieces I upload. It's the same as what I said in part 1.3 on how to rate an interpretation, about what to listen to, and about the role of honor placing all the significance on the instrument. Bach is saying it here too. What's he saying? He's saying, pay attention to the ends of the notes. He said our instrument holds out the tone longer than many might believe. Wenn man gewahr wird, dass unser Instrument den Ton länger aushält, als viele glauben mögen. The many he is referring to is the role of honor, whose understanding of the instrument or instruments was and still is misguided. The end of paragraph 15 from the introduction will support the claims I was making in part 1.3. The error of the thinking of the role of honor with regard to it all boiling down to the instrument, and it broadens the picture we have of Bach's stance. Spielt man beständig auf dem Flügel, so gewöhnt man sich an, in einer Farbe zu spielen. Und der unterschiedliche Anschlag, welchen bloß ein guter Klavichordspieler auf dem Flügel herausbringen kann, bleibt verborgen. Und der unterschiedliche Anschlag, welchen bloß ein guter Klavichordspieler auf dem Flügel herausbringen kann, bleibt verborgen. So wunderbar es auch scheint. Indem man glauben sollte, Alle Finger müssten auf einerlei Flügel, einerlei Ton herausbringen. Man kann gar leicht die Probe machen und zwei Personen, wovon der eine ein gutes Klavichord spielt, der andere aber bloß ein Flügelspieler ist, auf diesem letzteren Instrumente ein Stück mit einerlei Manieren kurz hintereinander spielen lassen und hernach urteilen, ob sie beide einerlei Wirkung hervorgebracht haben. He could issue the same challenge to the Roll of Honor experts, wanting to talk about the instruments, telling them to listen to a Roll of Honor player and then to Beethoven on the same instrument, be it a modern piano or the Hammerklavier of then days, and see if they produce the same effect. Also, he is talking not just to the Roll of Honor, but to the innocent victims of the Roll of Honor. The victims of those that live only to serve the cage. Even the erstwhile victims that later themselves became perpetrators, by default, by following orders, by succumbing to the pressures of society, by doing what they're told is the right thing, but who are in their hearts willing to repent, ready and willing to embrace the correct answers. When you're a victim, the other role you know intimately is the role of the perpetrator. You've had first-hand experience. And there'll be people in the Roll of Honor. Some people just live to, there'll be people in the Roll of Honor teaching who've had a career in piano, and it'll break their heart. Eventually it'll break their heart when they see people being disillusioned, failing, and when they realize that the things they've been told that work and the things they tell their students in the belief that they work, when they slowly start to realize that none of them work at all, none of them solve any of the problems, and the students end up like later on in life with the same tension, they still tensing up, trying to play the same pieces as they did when they were students, and all the things they were told on how to combat it, they all failed. And it'll break the teacher's heart to see them so disillusioned and all. And the tactic of the Roll of Honor then is you're meant to think you didn't have the talent. There's so much to do, only so much you can do, but at some point you have to face the reality that some people are just more talented than others. God favoured Kissin more than he favoured you. So he made it that Kissin was able to do these things without tensing. And he decided, yeah, I'll give it to Kissin, but not to you. That's how God works. And you're meant to accept that. And that is backward thinking. It is so ridiculous in the age of science and all. I mean, I don't think a true scientist would accept a hypothesis like that. That in the world of physics, of all these things, that such a concept could be accepted as in any way valid. And that's what you're meant to think when everything they've told you is failed. And how preposterous would the idea be that what they're telling you is wrong? And that's why you fail. And that's why, and eventually the people, and that's a big secret, they won't tell you that what they're telling you is a pile of crap and it'll never work because they haven't got a clue. And they know themselves. I mean, they'll see how disillusioned they are. They won't want to, when they're earning their money teaching the piano, the last thing they want to do when they get home is play the piano, because they are going to hear how crap they are at the piano. And they hate to hear it. They hate the sound of themselves on the piano. So they know it's worthless, and the only value it has in that it is in the value in how they can fool the people and they earn their money from it. But there'll be people who would love in that, victims who went on to be perpetrators, but who in their hearts would love to be able to tell their students the right answer, would love to see their students flourish, to be able to accomplish all the technical difficulties and really be happy with their piano playing. They'd love that. And that's who Bach is talking to, because he'd gladly see them escape the cage. Because if he wouldn't want to see them escape, he wouldn't have written his Versuch. He's also talking to them. So it's not just to the victims of the cage, it's people who are in the system but who would love to embrace the right answer. Okay, I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll pick up where I left off in the next video. Thanks. Bye.